Okay, hi.
Hello.
I don't really need a microphone, but good for him. You can still fit through there. I hope everybody's settled back into classes and their routine, yes? Did you guys watch the Super Bowl last night? Did you check out the official number 44? Did you see the Daily story? Yeah, the law grad from Case Western Reserve. This is his third Super Bowl officiating. So I love that he's a law grad. Not one of my students. Graduated before, a little before I was a faculty member back in the 19, I think he graduated in 75. I was there from 83 to 88 before I went to Ohio State. Anyway, I had a great time watching him. He did not get to call any of the, on the field. He didn't get to say anything. Somebody else does all the telling of all the results of their refereeing. But anyway, he was terrific, and it was fun to watch him last night. So thanks for coming tonight, and thanks for coming over here tonight, where Lou and I are. It's great. I don't know if you had a chance, some of you, when you were walking over to see the fireworks from the Lunar New Year. Wow, they were spectacular. We weren't sure they were going to do them because
of the weather.
Snowing. We didn't know. Anyway, they did them, and it was great. I think they did them over on Freiburger Field. But we are happy to be here to talk about housing and sort of anything else. But housing is incredibly important. You probably know this, but about 80% of our undergraduates live on campus, which is extremely high, especially for an urban campus. And those of you who were here last year when we did this know that I am a big fan of undergraduate students living on campus. And I'm part of the reason I think it's so important is because we know that students from national studies, not just at Case Western Reserve, but we know from national studies, one done as recently as 2010, that students who live on campus are more likely to have better grades and more likely to graduate on time than students who do not live on campus. So it is, and actually the differences are pretty clear. Students who live on campus for at least 2 years are 25% more likely to get a degree, which we think is pretty good. We also think there are lots of other benefits, and I don't have to tell this group about the benefits of getting to know your fellow students, making lasting friendships. I mean, you all live with this every day. So I'm gonna turn this open to questions, and Lou and I will both do our best to answer them. But I wanted to say something about a new initiative that we just announced last week, because it's about undergraduate students, and it's called the Provost Commission on the Undergraduate Experience. It's not just about housing, it's actually about everything, but it is a big 2-year effort to look at the undergraduate experience broadly and to figure out ways that we can enhance that experience on campus. It includes, as I said, housing, the whole residential experience, also curricular things. The ever popular topic of SAGES will be part of it. So there are lots of topics, but it will also look at how the things that we do in student affairs, student life, residence life activities bolster your academic growth, and also the way that our facilities can be made to help support the academic and student life experiences that we think are important. A faculty member, Professor Kim Emmons from the Department of English, is chairing this. Some of you may know her because she's at the Writing Center. Anybody know her? Yes, a few people nodding. Yeah, she's terrific. We also have faculty from the Case School of Engineering, the Francis Payne Bolton School of Nursing, the Weatherhead School of Management. We have a faculty member from the School of Medicine. We have senior leaders from the Office of Enrollment Management, from International Affairs, obviously from Student Affairs and Undergraduate Studies. And we have a student member of the commission. And they'll be doing a lot of meetings to get input and surveys, a variety of ways that they'll be in touch with you. So I know you're interested, because Victoria told us that you're interested in learning about the future of housing and residence life at Case Western Reserve. And this commission will be part of that. I also want to mention the Campus Master Plan. How many of you know what that is? Did you guys participate in any of the meetings about it? No? We had students involved in that process too.
Mm-hmm.
That was about a year and a half
At least, yeah.
long, maybe longer, yeah. So for me, I like the opportunity to come here because I like to ask questions as well as answer them. So I'm happy to answer your questions, but I'd also like to have you answer a couple of mine. One is just to try to get your perspective on residence life and how you think we should be thinking about that in 5 years and 10 years and down the road, because we're interested in that. And I often talk about the North Campus, South Campus. Should we have housing all consolidated in one place? I'd also love to know what you think of the new residence hall. Anybody living in the new residence hall? Oh, all right, well, you'll be on the spot. You can tell us what you think of the new residence hall. And then we have put a lot of effort and energy into the Uptown development, which if you had been here a long time ago, you would know really changed our campus. And I'd love to know what you think about what is happening in Uptown. So you can answer those anytime you want to, and I'd be happy to take your questions anytime. So if you want to answer one of those questions or ask a question, what's your process? Raise your hand.
Sure. We also have a couple questions that residents submitted on a form.
Okay. We'll take those too.
Does anyone want to answer a question, please?
Anybody
Where do you
want
see it going within the next 5 to 10 years? Residentiality.
Yeah, Lou, you can squeeze right through that little spot too.
I don't know.
Yes, you can. Yes.
I think it's really wonderful the focus on diversity and inclusion that we're kind of moving towards. And I know that RHA has made it a big point to work on gender inclusive housing. How do you see that moving forward in the future?
I think it will continue to get easier to do on our campus, but I have to tell you, I'm proud of the way that we have changed over time, and I think really thought about how to live our own values.
Mm-hmm. Sue Nico-Schindewolf, who's the Associate VP of Student Affairs, actually is coordinating. I know Victoria's been on the committee, and we have an ongoing committee that's looking at it. That last year was the first time, so it was kind of piloted, and now we want to get it continually so it's focused and really thought of as to where the spaces are going to be, where students want to be, and that kind of thing. So actually right at this time, Victoria, you even know more with the committee because Liz Roccaforte's on it.
Yeah.
Where is it right now?
So currently we are putting it on the application. I know I've given Judy like a little brief update before. It's going to be on the application. It's going to be like a separate like lifestyle section, so you can change it throughout the year and change your like gender pronoun preferences. In addition, it's going to be something that might let sophomores and upperclassmen live together to create more of that community rather than putting them like into suites that might not be the best situation. And then we're trying to just put those suites together, even if they are just ended up being all sophomores, all upperclassmen sort of thing, to create a very like close community where they can all help each other. And then as well as doing more RA training, it's been kind of included in like the RA application process and interview process. And so really building that in so that even RAs who aren't necessarily in the gender inclusive floors or communities will be able to create that gender inclusive environment so people can live also outside of it and live in other communities.
And it was my understanding that it's ready to go with the application and that kind of thing.
All on.
So yeah.
And one of the things we have to always be careful of, because it's sort of the plus and minus of doing this, is that it doesn't become the case that people who are living other places don't think it's their responsibility to make sure that
exactly.
the environment is inclusive. So you can't do this with an idea that, oh, this is just going to be a haven for people who want this, but nobody else has to worry about it who's living in other on-campus housing. So that's the one thing that we have to watch as we move forward with that.
Yep.
How about the new residence hall?
What do you see like in the next few years?
Well, what do you think of it so far? And yes, what would you like to see change about it in the next few years?
I really like the new res hall. I think I really enjoy like the amount of like study rooms that they have, which is really nice. And
Do people come and visit you to study in those rooms?
yeah, they do. Some people do. And I like the common room space that we have like on the second floor, especially.
So what are the downsides? Well, I know it wasn't ready on time, but you knew that before you signed up, right?
How are the fire alarms?
The
Is
fire
that
alarm
fixed?
Yeah,
situation has
yeah.
been not the best.
Yes, a bit
think that's
distracting,
fixed.
huh?
It is.
It's fixed now, though, at least that's what we're told,
Mhm.
right? Yeah.
Hopefully, I don't know, we've had like at least since winter break started, we've had like a lot of fire alarms happening. I heard there's like by the same suite, apparently there's by some of the same suites that it's been happening beforehand, but I know they tried to like add more vents systems in, but not all of
Mhm.
the apartments have vents. So, I guess that would be maybe something to.
Yes, that would be a major negative.
Other than that, I like that it's like close to the north residential area,
Mhm.
which is really nice. I'd like, I guess, there's not too much that I'd like to see. Maybe like a lot of the people they mostly spend time like in their rooms, not as much like going out and utilizing the spaces that we have in the new residential.
So why do you think
halls,
that's
so-
the case?
I don't know, maybe.
I mean, that's not just true in the
Yeah.
new residence
No,
hall,
I
let's
know.
face it.
It just
That
seems
is an
yeah.
issue that we have
Right.
across the
I
campus,
guess
right?
it just seems that way because like I pass by like a lot of places like going to the laundry room and stuff like that, and like the common room space is not really used that
Right.
often.
So you see this big, beautiful space empty a lot.
Yeah, and like the downstairs area common room.
So I know that happens not just there, but across the campus. I lived for 6 months in the village at 115. And we had a big, beautiful common room with a fireplace. And I was amazed
Yeah,
at how
that
often
didn't get
it
used to as much.
it was empty.
Right.
What's your thoughts, Mindy? You were going to say something.
Okay, sorry, I'm a bit of a cold,
It's
my
okay.
voice is gone, but, a couple links to the new res hall. One reason for that, and actually I was on the planning committee for how the design of the new res hall
Uh-huh.
looked like. So for me, it's kind of really cool to see everything come into play, all the suggestions go into play. And one thing we talked about was like, well, having kind of like the single floor style, almost hotel style rooming, would distract from like the community aspect. But what we brought up was like, one, it was more feasible to do like a design and build fast process than just doing it like rows, like hotel style. But also, like idea was that the upperclassmen and people who were on this committee were saying, well, people don't really come out just to hang out on their floor really, so if they'll make effort to use the space. So I guess when there are events and things like that, people come out and utilize
Yeah.
it and they like it. But
Good
it's
point.
really cool to see everything in play. Like I know we talked a lot about using a lot of incorporating a lot of light, so there's like lots of windows and light space where the sun actually comes in, especially in the study rooms. And I guess like the side note, I was even on like asked to help pick out like color designs, and it's just really funny seeing like, oh, I saw just like a sample carpet that's now like all over the entire room.
I hope you still like it.
Yeah, it looks good. All looks good.
You did great work,
Actually, one of the great things about having students who are, who are in the planning process, going to be here when the thing opens, is getting to see it come to life. And we had some students who were involved in planning for the Tink were already graduated by the time it was done. The students who tested the furniture for the Tink, though, got to, because that was done later in the process, they got to be here to see all their choices actually there, yeah, and people using them. So I appreciate that. Okay, Victoria.
So we have some questions from our residents. I'll start with one. One of the main ones we wanted to know was the future of kind of like residence halls and a little bit of Greek housing on campus and how that might change over the next 10, 20 years. However it looks like.
So we have thought a lot about that, and I think it's fair to say that we haven't really decided exactly what we're going to do with Greek housing. Lots of issues for discussion. One is creating a Greek village, which again has pluses and minuses, not dissimilar to what we said. Is it just like a place where other people wouldn't feel welcome, which is a major downside? On the other hand, there could be some advantages, and certainly we had some advocates for that. So I think we did not, in the master planning process, really come to a decision about that. We have also looked at some other universities that have planned new Greek housing that have put Greeks into residence halls, actually, into spaces within residence halls. So that's another thing that we have thought about over time. We have a mix of Greeks that have where the corporation, the fraternity or sorority owns,
Yep,
they have
the
a house
house corp.
corporation, owns the house, and then others where we own it. So whatever we did, we'd have to take all of that into account. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, because that's one of the things that we worry about. Obviously, we have quite a number of students who are involved in Greek life, but we also have more students who are not.
Like one of the models, Emory University, has kind of it would almost look like townhouses and kind of have them in a row. So they are considered residence halls per se, but they would look much more like the townhouse look right outside the new residence hall, that kind of row housing. You know, those are options. So there are a lot of things out there, but the students last year when we spoke to them, you know, numbers of students had numbers of opinions, so nobody came to a conclusion. So I agree with President Snyder. I'd be interested in hearing from any of you who even might be Greek, you know, what you think about
Or
that.
even if you're not,
Yeah.
if you have strong feelings about it, we'd love to know.
Tim.
Yeah, so I currently live in Greek housing, and I think I think it's good.
Which house, can we ask?
Phi Kappa,
Okay.
on top of the hill. I think it's a really good idea in theory, because I think like having a lot of those Greek houses, like, or like, you know, me on top of the hill, like having them all next to each other is great, a sort of sense of community. I just know that there's a lot of fraternities that like won't like have their own, like not have their own like special house. That would be hard for them to give up. So I know that location would be an issue for some people.
Location. Okay. Other thoughts?
On Greek housing?
Yeah.
So I'm actually in the Greek housing in Murray Hill in Tippett, and location is definitely, like, that was a big factor in a lot of my sisters choosing really not to live like on our floor. But I personally think like that was it's such an amazing opportunity that we don't have a house, but like the university still offered us a space. I feel closer to my sisters. I feel closer to like I think that like my experience in the residence halls has been like definitely improved because I get to live with my sisters, and we have, you know, there's like 30 of us on the whole floor versus maybe just living with like 5 of them in a suite. It's like even though we don't have a house, like I think that's a really awesome idea, like that we still get to live in the residence halls together.
Great.
And it's because of some of those experiences that we have thought about the possibility of having Greek life within residence life, maybe not so separated or isolated as one possibility. And we're still giving a lot of thought to that.
Indy.
I was just gonna add one kind of separate comment. Being part of like the newest sorority on campus, one of the things we talk about a lot because we're like building ourselves is like depositing a housing fund. And I think for us, probably many of the like more recent fraternities and sororities, the dream is like we want to build a mansion. And I'm not sure like how feasible that is or if that would be looked into or not, but I know we all kind of prepare for it regardless, that we do make those funds to help pay for some type of personal housing. So I think if there's like a median level that we could like mix like a townhouse style that's part of residential, like who knows, but I can't say that many people dream of their own mansion.
From a community standpoint, that tends to be the most successful when they're somewhat deliberately integrated into the rest of the community, and so that is a good possibility.
And you, as you mentioned, building your own mansion is probably financially, for a new chapter that's starting up, is going to be so far into the future, it's hard to think about how you're going to get that money.
Land is a problem, and
Because
zoning.
we don't have a lot of
and,
extra land.
all of that.
So a lot of challenges to doing that. And we have to deal with the fact that we have some fraternities and sororities that historically had a house. And so they have that. But if you're a newer chapter, it's very hard to get one.
So in addition to changes in Greek life housing, do you see any new residence halls being built or any like residence hall like renovations being done in the upcoming years?
Yes, I think probably the next most likely thing would be renovations,
Definitely,
not another new build. because right now, barring anything changing, we are sort of at a steady state of students. Last year we were a little overcrowded because we just graduated. We had this one class where we had an overabundance of acceptances, more than we were planning. And that class just graduated. And so we replaced it with a class. So we're doing about 1,250, so about 5,000 undergraduates at any given time. So we do need to renovate housing, but I don't expect to see, at least in the next few years, another new residence hall being built after that one. But we do need to renovate, and believe me, we are well aware of that.
Yep, definitely.
Kind of a follow-up question. In the master plan that kind of just rolled out of applicability, the one that ended 2016, one of the big pushes was the chance of kind of moving away from the 1960s, 1970s first-year residence halls. And there were discussions in that master plan of not really renovating them because the expectation was replacement.
Yes.
And I was curious kind of what you saw with that. I know some of the expected housing increases were meant to kind of cover eventual replacement.
So if you read the master plan, you know that one of the ways that our experts in student life think about housing is the way that our housing choices move along with you as you develop over the, let's say, 4 years that you're here.
Transitional living model.
So you start with something that is not exactly like the bedroom in your parents' house, but not that far distant from it. And then you move to something gradually that's like living in an apartment, except that it's on campus. And so I think there's still some belief on the part of people in student life that that is a pretty good model, which means that we would not necessarily, whether we tear down a building or not is not the issue. It's what kind of housing would we be looking for, whether we did a renovation or a new build. And so I think the question, and a question for you all, is how well you think that model works as you move from, from living in a sort of a basically bedroom situation, not that far different, except you got a roommate. Most of you probably had your own rooms at home. A lot of students now do. But starting with that and then moving toward an apartment where you have a kitchen, you cook, or if you want to, you cook. And how you think that works for you, forgetting about the housing for a minute, but just how it plays into what you think of as development, maturity and all of that, because that's really what we'd be looking to hear. So if the idea is, wow, we think we should just move right into apartments, our evidence would suggest that probably is not the best thing for a brand new freshman coming from their parents' house, and that the progression actually works reasonably well.
And particularly in an environment like this that is highly academically driven, where we tie in the advising very deliberately, as the coordinators also work for Jeff Walkowitz, and so that way you're front loading services as people come in, and then kind of letting those kind of taper off as more independence comes.
So how do you think that works?
I think we've kind of all discussed the benefits of, especially the quad style living, and some of the first year halls have definitely an atmosphere that's different than the other halls. I think the question that rises the most is not so much the efficacy of the model, but more the relational pricing. For example, at other schools like Kent, this first year housing that's more bedroom style rather than apartment style is significantly cheaper than the apartment style because the resources are very different.
Yeah.
Whereas the discrepancy isn't as.
And that's one thing the task force right now, the housing task force, is looking at. Yep.
I mean, I think that's a totally fair point. The only thing I would say is that while the buildings may not be as beautiful as the Village at 115 or the new residence hall, the staff resources during the first year in particular are much more intensive. And so I know it doesn't feel good to be spending money on staff, but we do that because, and I do think that that's important.
Definitely,
and I think
it is.
our evidence would suggest that having that level of staffing in the first year residence halls is actually pretty important.
So I wanted to jump in with a question from a resident. They say, Many of my residents have expressed frustrations with facilities now that housing, residence life, and facilities are separate departments. Knowing these concerns, does the university have any plans to address them, such as possibly recombining the departments? And then what was the original reason for splitting these departments, and do you think that purpose is being upheld?
I think the original reason for splitting the departments is to make sure that we have the student affairs side of the operation really focusing on the student life activities and not on running buildings, which we have people who, that's what they do. And so trying to separate the sort of business side of making sure that maintenance things get done. And there's a great connection, and they work, I think, really closely together. So I think it's too soon. This just happened last year.
Right.
So I would say it's too soon to say whether it's really living up to its purpose, and we'll have to evaluate that. And we'll sit down and talk to all the people from the Vice President of Student Affairs team and the people from the staff and facilities and the housing and dining are now together and run by the same vice president. So I think the idea would be to assess it, but we haven't done that yet. And we would probably give it
Yeah, a
at
little more
least till the end of this year before we try to take a look and see how it's working and how it's not. But we've tried to deal with, obviously in the transition there were a few things that could have been better. But remarkably, I think it was handled really well, and I give the credit for that to Vice President Stark, who absolutely was a stellar leader and has been, he understands how to manage change as great leaders do. Are people emailing you questions?
Yeah,
love
that's what
that.
I was wondering the same thing. Yeah.
Okay. We kind of like the immediacy of
Yeah.
that. Wow, somebody just emailed a question from Building 4 at the Village of 115. Okay, we'll take it.
So one of the other questions is about like the piece of the provost information on Friday. So the provost said that room and board prices were increasing to provide funds for capital investments, deferred maintenance, and the new residence halls. Besides besides these funding increases, with the number of students living in the new residence hall, with the number of students increasing on campus, why isn't the budget balancing? So I guess it's just kind of like a general question about like housing prices.
Yeah, one of the things he did say, no problem, but he also talked about salaries and having to, keep up and look at salaries. So anytime you increase, whether it be tuition or your room and board, in the case of room, you're putting money aside as well for the deferred maintenance things that you have to do. So if we replace new bathrooms, for instance, in the first year buildings, or if we are looking at roofs. So for instance, I can think this year coming up, I want to say I can think of 4 roofs that we have to do. Now that's nothing that we see typically, but we don't want, the roofs leaking and those kinds of things.
If we don't do it, you see that.
Yeah, so it's keeping up with that. That it's not a matter of balancing the budget, but it's being able to continue to do the level of work necessary to create the environment.
We have not had a deficit budget since I got
Yeah.
here. We had one the year before I came, but since then, our surpluses are sometimes really small, but we have not had an unbalanced budget
Yeah.
since then.
But deferred maintenance is very, very important, and
Very.
it's one thing, particularly in residence halls, with the wear and tear. So for instance, as many of you have seen, we try to rotate in new furniture because, if the building is in good shape and we're attempting to keep those things up. So when was it, last summer, the summer before, we did another building in the first year areas and residences. So we put them on a plan and we try to keep it up because it's important and it helps you keep it up too, the better we keep it up. So it works both ways, and we're grateful for that.
Yeah, but there are always things to be done,
Yeah.
even when you don't see them. And I will say that residence halls are not like your house at home.
Yeah,
The
they get a little more wear,
carpet
right?
doesn't last as long, and a lot of other things don't last as long. So it's a constant schedule of upkeep. You have another one just texted in from
Yeah.
somewhere?
Yeah, maybe.
Talking about buildings and new residential halls, especially the freshman dorms, the residential halls. Is there any initiatives to make it more sustainable or green in the future?
Yes, every time we build a new building, we commit to getting LEED certification. I don't know what we'll get for the new residence hall. We just found out that we got LEED Gold for the Tink. So we are always committed to doing that. We also commit to do that when we do a renovation as well. Because we have, I signed the college and university president's climate commitment. And so we have to keep working on our carbon footprint, which is hard. And the residence halls are just one place, but every building that we do, whether we do a major renovation or whether we build something new, we are always looking to be sustainable. That's our long-term commitment. And that commitment goes until 2050, 2050.
Wow.
So it's a long-term effort. I won't be here that long, just to be clear.
I don't think I will either. Andrew, did you have another one?
No, we're gonna pass them on.
Oh, okay.
Hi, thank you so much for coming.
Oh, thank
Everyone
you.
else is using these. Okay. I had a question more not geared towards directly the residence halls, but the university as a whole. I've been hearing a lot of things about new buildings, renovations, the new West Campus and the engineering buildings, and also about the Fund Forward program. Could you speak a little bit to where directly the donor money is going to go to as the university's top priority in that sense?
So donor money goes where donors can restrict their money, and almost all do, not everybody. Very occasionally somebody writes us a check and says, do whatever you think is best. But that is extremely rare, and most of the money we get is for something. So sometimes it's for a building, sometimes it's for a scholarship, sometimes it's for an endowed professorship, and sometimes it's for an academic program of one sort or another. I want to establish a center of some kind. And so it really depends on what the donor wants. We try to make sure that when we take a gift, if we choose to take a gift, that we are wanting to, that it is also congruent with our own priorities, whatever it is. We don't want to just take money to do something that we really don't think is best for Case Western Reserve. Scholarships are a huge priority, and we are doing our spring development event. We do an event, big event every year in the spring, and it is focused solely on scholarships. And my own gift to the capital campaign is to create an endowed scholarship, because I wanted to step forward and say, I think this is the most important thing. That doesn't mean that the other things aren't important. Of course they are. Students have to have a place to live. You have to have great faculty. We need money to support all of those things. But in communicating to donors, I thought if I did that, it would be easier for me to ask other people to step up and do it too. So that's why we're doing that. We also, by the way, are doing something new, and I want to mention this because even though you probably think to yourselves, I'm not able to give any money to anybody's scholarship, I'm just trying to pay my way through school, I want you to think down the road a little bit, because what we have done in the past is focus only on endowed scholarships. So we were looking for somebody to give us $1 million, not necessarily in one bite, but over time, $1 million, so we could endow a scholarship, in perpetuity. And while we still want to get those gifts to endow scholarships, and we love the round number of $1 million, or more. We love even the rounder number of $10 million. But not everybody can write that big a check. So what we decided to do is try something new that we just started this year, and we hired somebody who's focused just on that in development. She does nothing but raise scholarship dollars. We decided that we would try to raise money for people who can't write $1 million check, but maybe who could write a $100,000 check or a $20,000 check. And we say, if you can write a $100,000 check, we will give a student a $25,000 scholarship every year for 4 years. You will get to meet that student, know who they are, they will write to you, and if you're local or if you're out of town and you want to come to campus, we commit that they will have the opportunity to meet the recipient of their scholarship And I will tell you, it's a really powerful thing. So then we also started, if you can't write a check for $100,000 or $20,000, which would be a $5,000 scholarship every year, we started pooling people's money who want to give any amount to scholarships, and we're putting those in a pool that will fund scholarships, not with endowment, but will be spent, the next year. So the idea of those, by the way, if we get somebody, let's say we find somebody to write the $100,000 check, and we've gotten a few people to do that, we are hoping that they will love the experience of giving a scholarship, meeting that scholarship recipient, and that will be such a compelling experience for them that they will want to write the $1 million check down the road. So we're hoping that it's something that they love doing. So I would urge you, when you get the calls, and you will, does anybody work in the call center now for development? None of you? None of you has the experience of calling our alumni
That's
for
kinda
money?
fun, yeah.
I'm so disappointed. We have a big call center, and current students work there and call and ask for support. But I hope that when you get one of those calls after you graduate, and you will, that you will consider designating your gift, because you can designate it for anything. Like if you're on the student
Exactly.
newspaper, you can say, I want it to go to the Observer. You can say, I want it to go to RHA. Now they'll start lobbying for RHA, which is fine too. But you can also say, I want it to go to scholarships for undergraduate students. And whatever the amount is, even if it's $10, we hope you will give something to scholarships if you think it's important too. I thought it was important, and that's why I'm doing it.
Yeah.
You talked about how 80% of students live on campus, and and I think we all agree it's very important for students to stay on campus. We think there's a lot of value in it. And we were just looking at the 4-year pricing change and how it's about 16%. And it's kind of hard to talk to first years, say, yeah, by the time you're a senior, it'll be 16% more expensive to live in those expensive buildings already. So I guess, how are you guys working to encourage students to stay on campus? Because I guess the numbers alone don't really tell a convincing story.
Well, one of the things from my perspective, one of the reasons students stay on campus here is that we have the variety of housing that we do. And with that comes the service, and comes not having to worry about sometimes the other things you worry about when you are a renter. The other thing is that it's very convenient, to the uptown now. So when President Snyder said before about uptown, that's done a lot for that north area to really create a vibrancy that we hadn't seen before. So that's been another thing. But one of the things the task force is looking at is the pricing strategy as we kind of move forward and kind of have those discussions. So looking at how do we price those buildings so that way they continue to be attractive. Because we are, compared to most of our peers, except we'd be about the same as WashU, but let's say Emory, for instance, is about 62–63%. And so we have that kind of culture here where residentiality is part of the experience. And so that's something, of course, we want to see continue.
And I'll tell you, one of the things I think is most powerful at persuading a lot of students to live on campus is talking to other students who do live on campus and hearing really from you all about what the experience is like. I think that more than dollars, although I'm not saying that's not important, and I do think we have to do a better job of trying to differentiate, and that's what this task force is looking at, between pricing for higher quality housing. But I also will continue to remind students that the housing that seems less high quality, which is a lot where our freshmen are, also requires much more intensive staff resources than
Very
is
much
required in the, yes, especially for the first year students, than is required for the students in the village. It's just a completely different experience, and that costs money too. But I think that's fair. I think, though, that one of the reasons we're so successful at getting students to live on campus is because so many of you who live on campus are walking advertisements for the benefits of living on campus, and I think RHA is a big part of that. I hope you'll continue to be.
And one of the reasons last year we opened up some more property management was for that variety. And students asked for that. So we
That
sat down
actually is
and
the
we
real
kinda,
reason.
Yep, exactly.
Students ask for it,
And
and
we
we
kinda
said, okay.
Said they wanted variety, and they looked at pricing. So we did say okay to that.
That doesn't mean we can do everything,
No,
but we try.
exactly, we try. Yeah.
Kind of along those same lines, do you think that one of the big reasons students do choose to stay on campus, in addition to all the benefits that you mentioned earlier, is that there's a chance that they'll lose their scholarship?
They don't lose their scholarship, but I agree that it's financially better for students who are getting scholarships to live on campus. But we have students who have no scholarships who live on campus too.
Yeah.
So it's not that demonstrably is not the only reason.
But that task force is looking
At
at
that
three
too.
things. It's looking at the scholarship issue, it's looking at the lottery, and it's looking at pricing. So we have three kind of issues that they broke into subcommittees on. Which one are you on?
Lottery process.
Yeah, lottery.
Actually, if I hear anything from families, it's about the lottery.
Mhm. Yep, me
I
too.
have to tell you, when I hear from usually parents.
Yeah,
it's
particularly when
about
we were
something happening with
overcrowded
the
and people
lottery.
didn't get the spot they wanted,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Well, that is our time. Do you have any closing statements or anything?
No, but I will say, we thank you for all you do to make residents' life at Case Western Reserve as wonderful as it is, and we hope that RHA will continue to commit to work with us to make it even better. There are lots of opportunities as we renovate things. We opened a new residence hall this year, but there will always be opportunities to make
Yep.
changes in the way we think about residents' life. So instead of just asking us, what's the future look like, we want you to say, we want to engage with you and be part of creating that future, so we hope you will.
And we will have some focus groups through the Provost Commission to talk about some of these issues. And of course, when it comes to residentiality, I'm going to be looking towards the folks in this room to really participate, because you tend to have a real knowledge about it, but you also represent a huge constituency, which is 80%.
Thank you all very much. Thanks for having us.